The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to NOVA's presentation of Secure 2.0 Mandatory Automatic Enrollment Coming to Your Plan with Steve Best and Kim Rader. Before we get started, I would like to point out the panel on the top right-hand corner of your computer screen. You're going to see a drop-down section for chat. This is where you're going to enter in any questions that you may have for Steve and Kim. Feel free to submit your questions at any time. If time does run out and you still have questions, you can email us at webinars@nova401k.com. Right below chat, you will see a drop down for handouts. Here you will be able to download today's material. Thank you so much for joining us today. I would now like to introduce two of NOVA's shareholders, Director of DC Client Relations, Kim Rader, and our VP, Steve Best.
All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on some of the new automatic enrollment rules that will apply in 2025. First, a quick disclaimer that this presentation is not generally intended to be legal advice or tax advice, and if you need that kind of advice, please consult an attorney or an accountant. Quick little agenda, we'll go over some of the new automatic enrollment requirements, talk a little bit about some plan design and administration ideas that you might want to consider. We'll get into some best practices on how to administer automatic enrollment plans, discuss some of the default amendments that NOVA has planned for this change, and then discuss a little bit about what principles, systems, and automatic enrollment support can do for you. So the Secure 2.0 Act that was passed in December of 22 required all plans that were brand new plans after the enactment date of December 22nd to have an automatic enrollment provision at least effective by January 1st of 2025. So any kind of startup plan that was adopted basically in 2023 and 2024 that does not have an automatic enrollment feature will need to be updated to add that. And this is not an option. It is a mandate by that act and by Congress and the IRS. So what is automatic enrollment? It's basically a negative election. So if somebody, a participant, an employee does not make an affirmative election to contribute to the 401k plan, they're defaulted into the plan at a specified rate that's set by the plan document. And by you as the plan sponsor when you're determining what that percentage needs to be. Also, if somebody does later make an affirmative election, then that default percentage will cease to apply, and whatever they've elected is what gets deducted from their payroll. So the benefits, obviously, is automatic enrollment is going to essentially force people into the plan at an elected rate if they don't make a decision. So it's going to improve the overall participation in your plan. It encourages people to save for retirement, and that is one of the reasons that Congress mandated this particular provision for all new plans. They recognize that one of the biggest challenges that we have facing us as a country is that most individuals in the country really are not saving enough for retirement, and these provisions are designed to help with that. As a result, since plan participation goes up, for any plans that are subject to the average deferral percentage test, which is a participation test that can limit how much the highly compensated people can put in, adding participation to your plan is going to help that particular test and also help how much the highly compensated employees can contribute to the plan. Because of some of the permissible withdrawals that we'll get into in a moment, an additional benefit is that a plan gets an additional 6 months to process any refunds if the ADP or ACP testing is failed. The normal deadline is 2.5 months after your plan year ends. So there is extra time to get these refunds processed without penalty, which is a good thing. Also, Also, as an added benefit, any plan that's adding automatic enrollment is going to get a $500 credit for the first 3 years, a tax credit. So that money can be used to offset any additional administrative burden and expense for the plan. Some of the challenges involve additional administration. So, it's going to be more work in identifying who needs to be automatically enrolled and when, and systems will need to track who has been automatically enrolled, and this is going to increase operational errors in the plan. Also, the result is that there will be smaller account balances that are created in the plan. That can increase some of the cost to administer the plan just based on the investment provider and some of the fee schedules. If your plan is making a match, it could be a discretionary match at this point or a required safe harbor type of match, but those costs will increase as well because you're effectively forcing people into the plan. Again, don't make an affirmative election, and you'll have to give them additional matching contributions as well. So, although we don't get too many employee complaints, it should be expected that there might be some, right, where individuals are screaming about not knowing that this automatic enrollment feature applied to them, and they want their money back, which we'll get into in a moment. Also, the percentage at which people are automatically enrolled, can vary, although there are some rules that we have to follow. So the basic type of automatic enrollment plan that's required is called an eligible automatic contribution arrangement, or an EACA. So this is going to apply to all newly started 401k plans and 403b plans that were established after December 22nd, 2022. In the first year, the automatic enrollment percentage can be a percentage starting at 3% or going as high as 10, or you can actually go higher than that to 15, but it's got to at least have a minimum of 3% as the default election percentage. And it also has to have an auto escalation feature that escalates 1% every year until you get to 10% and up to a maximum of 15. So the EACA provisions do come with other requirements. 90-day permissible withdrawals are required. This used to be an option under the old EACA provisions. Now this is required to be a feature. And again, if you have people complaining that they want their money back because they didn't realize they were going to be automatically enrolled, this is the mechanism for which they can get distributions out of the plan and get their money back, and then elect a zero rate of deferral. So any kind of election, again, is permissible so long as they make an affirmative election. So it could be zero up to whatever they want to put in the plan. The EACA provisions also include the requirement for a qualified default investment alternative. Again, this is the investment that somebody who is automatically enrolled would be invested into if they didn't make any selection of what mutual fund or investment they wanted to be in. So each of the plans has a specific QDIA or fund that these automatically enrolled individuals' money would go into. Also, there's an annual notice requirement that needs to be given to people every year, at least 30 days, but not 90 days, not earlier than 90 days before the plan year starts. So there's an annual notice requirement. The other type of automatic contribution arrangement is called a QACA, or Qualified Automatic Contribution Arrangement. This is a safe harbor plan version of the EACA. So what is a safe harbor plan? This average deferral percentage test that we're talking about, this participation test that can, again, limit what highly paid individuals can put in based on the participation of the non-highly paid. This exempts the plan from that testing altogether. It does have a very short vesting schedule that would apply to the employer contributions that go into the plan, which is an advantage over the traditional safe harbor plan. We'll get into some of the plan design ideas that you might want to consider going into next year. But because the formula is capping out at a lower rate, basically you have to give dollar for dollar on the first 1% that an employee contributes, and then 50 cents on the next 5%. If you do the math, the maximum amount of employer contribution or percentage that you would have to give any one individual caps out at 3.5% versus the traditional safe harbor plan that caps out at 4%. So it's a little bit cheaper, and you do get a vesting schedule that you can apply. There's also the 3% non-elective variety. Again, non-elective safe harbors or contributions go to everyone in the plan who is eligible to contribute, not necessarily just those who actually make a contribution. So again, a match is what it sounds like. If I put something as an employee, the employer is going to give me a match or an additional contribution because I'm contributing. Auto escalation is required under both varieties of the safe harbor automatic enrollment plans. So this is an example of what might happen, right? You've got to, if you start at 3%, you're going to auto escalate somebody annually until they get to 10%. Now, plans can avoid the auto escalation altogether if you just start at 10%. And that is actually going to be our recommendation, because if you start thinking about the fact that you're going to have to track who these individuals are that got automatically enrolled and then escalate them every year on time, I mean, you're talking about a lot more work, and we would highly recommend that you do not put this feature in your plan. I mean, it's just easier to avoid it and put it in at 10%. There are many studies that show that individuals who are automatically enrolled at 3% or 10% don't tend to opt out at any higher rate. That said, if participants are complaining about the high rate of automatic enrollment, again, they can always request their money back within the first 90 days, but this would save you a lot of work with the escalation. So just so you realize how complicated this can be, in the first year of participation, when you're dealing with auto escalation, you'd have to, it begins when the individual is first automatically enrolled, right? And then that first year ends on the last day of the following year. So in that very first year, if I'm put into the plan mid-year, you're gonna auto escalate as late as what, like 18 months or more. So in the second year, that switches to the first of the following year. So we put this in here just to show you how complicated this can be and why you really would prefer not to deal with auto escalation at all in your plan and just start defaulting people at the 10% rate when we amend the plan. There are some exemptions from the automatic enrollment requirements. So if you were a plan, a grandfathered plan that was established prior to December 29th, 22, then these requirements don't apply to you. However, if you're on this webinar today, we have already established that you were a startup plan and that the automatic enrollment requirements likely apply. Now, if you're a new company with less than 3 years of existence, you're exempt. Or if you're a very small employer with less than 11 employees, you're exempt. And then government and church plans and then simple 401k plans are also exempt. So there are a limited number of exemptions. You may be asking if, can you opt out if you fit one of these exemptions, especially maybe the small plan or the 3 years. You can, however, NOVA is not going to be tracking these, anniversary dates or when you go over some of these limits. So it'll be up to you to determine when the automatic enrollment requirements apply, because if you're exempt initially, that doesn't mean that you're exempt forever. So when these don't apply anymore, then you still have to add automatic enrollment. Some administration and plan design ideas. So as a plan sponsor, it is one of your responsibilities is to enroll all of your employees into the plan on time. And you can get help from the investment providers like Principal with eligibility tracking, but all of them, no matter what investment provider that is, needs to have a full census data feed each pay period from your company. And we find that most of our smaller employers do not, in fact, provide that much data to the investment providers. And so if they don't, again, if you think about it, they need to know when somebody's hired in order to calculate when they would be eligible pursuant to the terms of your plan. And if they're not getting data on everyone, every pay period, they can't really do that and provide a report to you that would indicate, hey, automatically enroll this list of people on this date, right? So one of the other recommendations we make, if you want to provide that data each pay period, is to have a 180, what we call a 180 payroll integration, or a 360. So 360 would be a complete link when an employee makes a request to change their deferral rate at Principal. That then feeds automatically into your payroll system, and likewise, any changes in your payroll system, you know, are remitted back to the payroll provider. So it's a full sharing of information between the payroll system and the investment provider systems. So that's the most efficient and easiest to manage. And Kim will go into a few of the payroll providers that we know can work with Principal on these types of connections. So plans, you need to determine, you've got some implementation responsibilities. So we're going to go through some plan design change ideas, and you're going to need to determine which ones you want and what NOVA's default amendments are going to be. We'll get into that in a moment. But we'll need you to decide on that within 10 business days of when we let you know what the default amendment will be. You're also going to need to sign that amendment. It does require a signature. It's not something that we can adopt on your behalf. Part of your responsibilities also are going to have to be to update your payroll systems to change matching formulas if you actually make a change in your match and you're making one. You also need to be able to track default enrolled participants. Right? If you don't know who those individuals are, and you're dealing with escalation, how can you automatically escalate them properly? Right? Also, if we change your plan design from, let's say, a traditional safe harbor match to now a QACA match, or maybe you're not a safe harbor at all, and you're just doing a discretionary match at this point, there will need to be an extra money source or a bucket of money at Principal set up to receive those funds. You can't, because there's a vesting schedule on a QACA match, for example, and there's not one on a traditional match, safe harbor, you can't commingle those monies in the same source. Otherwise, then we're going to have to be working with you to fix that problem after the fact. So just to go through a few of the administrative steps, right, on what do I have to do to automatically enroll people properly. First, you're going to have to identify the group of eligible employees per the waiting period in your plan, right? Then there's a variety of enrollment materials that have to be required, including notices, right? So Principal has enrollment kits and instructions, but part of what is not provided under with those enrollment kits typically is the summary plan description, which is a legally required document that we give you along with your legal plan document that outlines the provisions of your plan in plain English to participants. Right. Then we've got the automatic enrollment notice that we mentioned before. If you are a safe harbor plan, there's an additional safe harbor notice. and then the QDIA notice. All of that is part of the initial enrollment packet that you need to give people. Then whatever affirmative elections participant makes have to be entered into your payroll, and those who don't make an election have to be defaulted at whatever rate your plan indicates they should be, right? So it's got to be a rate from 3% to 10%. And then if you're dealing with auto escalation, as we mentioned, you're going to have to be able to track who those default invested or default enrolled participants are so that you can escalate them on time. And then all of the contributions that are deducted from people's paychecks have to be sent in to principal within 3 to 5 business days. That's the time frame that the Department of Labor does not consider late in general. And then best practices would be to save enrollment materials, or lists of the employees that you've offered the plan to, just in case you're audited. Right? I know from personal experience that one of the things the IRS always wants to see is prove to me that you offered the plan to your participants on time. And most plan sponsors don't do this kind of thing in terms of saving these lists, and it's a difficult thing to do. So some plan design considerations. Again, we highly recommend that 10% be the initial automatic enrollment percentage. That'll reduce the administrative burden of the auto escalation tremendously for you. Also, something that we recommend, and we will do this part, the second bullet, for you in general, but because participation rates improve with automatic enrollment, it's better to change your testing method to the current year method, where we look at data from the current year instead of the prior year to do your testing. So some safe harbor alternatives. Right now, some of you on the call may have what we call a traditional basic safe harbor matching design, which has a very specific formula that's a little more expensive than the QACA. So that formula is 100% of the first 3% and 50% of the next 2. So that one caps out at 4%, and it also has a 100% required vesting schedule. So if you have that type of a formula right now for this year, you may want to consider redesigning your plan to have a QACA safe harbor match for 2025. Again, why? It's got all the same requirements. I mean, you're going to have to auto escalate and auto enroll people, but the formula is cheaper under the QACA, and if people leave within the 2-year vesting period, then you can recoup the match where you can't with a basic traditional safe harbor. So you may want to consider that, and let us know. We can update your plan document and help you convert to that type of a matching formula. So in general, very short waiting periods are more difficult to administer in an automatic enrollment plan, just because of the notification requirements and sometimes some of the investment provider record keeper system limitations. Kim will go over what principles are in a moment. But we would recommend probably an initial waiting period for your employees of 60 days. Again, this could be changed, even though you might have something different in there right now. You may want to consider a 60-day waiting period with at least quarterly entry dates. We would consider that to be the least administratively burdensome for you.
Steve, we had a question come in.
Sure.
For existing plans created after December 29th, 2022, does the plan need to through an auto-enroll period for existing employees who were employed before January 1st, 2025, whether they're currently eligible on January 1st, 2025, or become eligible after January 1st, 2025, but employed in 2024?
Yeah, so at the moment, that is like, so who does the automatic enrollment apply to? And that, at the moment, that is something we're waiting for some additional guidance from the IRS. And I know the American Retirement Association has requested that sort of guidance. Again, I could tell you what we think And we think it will probably apply to everyone that has no affirmative election. But it's not clear in the current guidance who you have to apply that to starting in 2025. So hopefully we can get some of that before the end of the year and let you know, but it is a question at this point.
There was another one. What is the deadline to request a change in the basic safe harbor or CRACA safe harbor match to be effective in 2025?
What was that again? What was the procedure?
What is the deadline to request a change in the basic safe harbor or CRACA safe harbor match to be effective in 2025?
I believe we're making our, again, this will be under some of our defaults, but we're asking employers to make a decision by 10/1, I believe. Again, if you're going to change your plan design, and you can imagine how many plans there are at Principal, and the volume that they might receive in terms of having to update for automatic enrollment, we've got to give not only our documents team, but also Principal plenty of time to make the changes. And part of what we're going to have to do is help you fill out the proper forms to add extra sources. I mean, there's a whole bunch of logistics that go into this update, and we can't be accepting changes too late in the year. All right, so just so you also know, there are going to be mistakes, right, with automatic enrollment. There's a lot of moving pieces, and luckily, the IRS, under their self-correction program, has made it a little easier to fix these types of problems. So essentially, if you can, so I don't automatically enroll somebody on time. What do? If you can get correct deferrals started within 9.5 months of the plan you're following the year in which the mistake was made, then you don't owe anything on the employee deferral portion. But if your plan was making a match, then you do owe all of the match. So if the election should have been 3% and you missed it, you just get 3% started as soon as possible. You're going to have to send out a notice 45 days, within 45 days of making that correction, and then give them all of the matches if they'd have put the 3% in from the time they should have been automatically enrolled to the time you made the update in your payroll system. But if you're not making any kind of a match at all, then you just get them started at the correct rate, and there's no other penalty, which is nice. If you miss the 45, but you do have to give the notice, and that's a notice that we can provide. Just let us know if you've had a problem with automatic enrollment, and we've got a corrections team that can help get you all fixed up. So, Kim, I guess you're up for best practices.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So I know we're almost at the half hour past. We are recording this. We will keep going. We do have a little bit more material here, but if you need to drop off, we will. This is recorded, so we can always. It will be posted to our YouTube after completion. Okay, next slide, Steve. So I'm going to just hit on some high points on best practices. Steve did go over a few of these earlier, but just kind of wanted to outline these in a summary. So one of our best practice tip number 1 is to submit a full census file each payroll to your investment provider, to Principal. So really this is a best practice so that you can, Principal can then identify who's eligible, who's not, who's opted out, and return that information back to you. The best census files that give Principal the most amount of data include the name, mailing address, email, dates of hire and term, of course, any rehire, and then some files will have an indicator for compensation data. Next slide, Steve. again, Steve kind of touched on this earlier, but if there's any payroll integration available, you should definitely explore that. We do have a couple of different solutions for you. First of all, Principal does support both 180 and 360 payroll feeds under certain conditions. You should reach out to your Principal rep to get started on those and to explore what options might match with them. But those really are good solutions so that, you know, to set up kind of a payroll file between Principal and your payroll provider. The second one listed is NovaLink. That is a service unique to Nova. It is a service that we provide. We use a software that is able to pull certain census information from your payroll provider. So the payroll providers that we currently can do this with are listed here: ADP Run, Paychex Flex, QuickBooks Online, and Gusto. We do expect more payroll providers to be added throughout the year, and we will be reaching out to clients who that applies to, but this could be a good solution to assist you to pulling information from your payroll provider. There are additional fees for this, so reach out to your account manager if you're interested in this. And then, like I said, we will be adding more varying payroll providers, so watch out for more information. We also do have a sister company here at Nova called AFS that does offer 316 services. That company can help you with payroll files and payroll submissions. So we have a contact on here, Jacob H at afs316.com. If you are interested in exploring that option, feel free to reach out to Jacob. You can also reach out to your account manager to help facilitate that, but AFS will help provide, will help you and assist you do payroll submissions for your contributions every pay run. Okay, next slide, Steve. Another best tip is to turn on eligibility tracking with your investment provider. I'll get into a few slides in a moment about what Principal is doing, but as a general good tip, if your investment provider offers any eligibility tracking, reach out to them and make sure that feature is turned on. They can track eligibility if they're fed the certain data, and then generate enrollment kits, and also feed you back census information for each pay period. Next slide, Steve. We kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but with auto escalation, really due to the extra administrative burden, we really recommend against that. We recommend keeping your auto enrollment to go in at 10% and not do auto escalation. That really is buying you an additional administrative burden doing that. Through different studies have been done, and it has been studied that there's not really a difference in opt-out rate among participants at the different percentages. So whether you opt someone in at 3% or 10%, they aren't going to opt out very much between those two rates. So again, we're recommending auto enroll at 10%. Okay, yes. So we'll get into plan amendments and a little bit of the action plan on what you will be seeing for your plan coming up in the next weeks. So when we talk about plan amendments, there are some mandatory provisions and then some optional provisions. So as Steve mentioned earlier, this is a required provision. It is mandatory. So effective 1/1/25, you will need to amend your plan to become an EACA, that eligible automatic contribution arrangement type of plan. You will need to do auto escalation to 10%. That is the requirement. And there's the requirement for the 90-day window for permissible withdrawals. So again, that allows someone who forgot to opt out and comes back to you within 90 days, they can take a distribution. The default provisions that we touched on a little bit earlier is, applying to all the existing participants except for those who have the affirmative election. 10% of compensation for each payroll period, no escalation, contributions will be pre-tax. So those will be NOVA's default provisions, you know, unless otherwise requested. We will go ahead and issue that amendment. Next slide, Steve. I think it talks a little bit more about that. So again, the defaults mentioned in the previous slide will be sent as our default amendment. What will happen is next week you will be sent an email with detailed instructions on what will happen. We'll tell you, you know, we will be sending you an amendment with our defaults. Again, that'll be going in at 10%. No auto escalation, and allowing the 90-day permissible withdrawal. And unless you tell us otherwise, we will then go ahead and deliver an amendment to you via DocuSign to sign. Some people on this call might have other provisions, but we will tailor that amendment to your specific plan on which provisions need to be turned on. After that part is done, so after you receive your amendment and you sign it, NOVA will assist in updating principal or your record keeper for these different provisions. So you won't need to do that. NOVA will help to update the record keeper to turn on the auto enroll features, which includes adding an additional money source if needed. So if you're that quack and needed to add an additional source, and updating plan highlights. We are targeting to send all forms and everything to be done at the record keepers by 10/1. It might be earlier, but we're really needing to update the record keepers no later than 10/1. Okay, in my last few slides, we'll talk a little bit about the support principal is providing. So your principal rep is here to help. You can reach out to your principal rep. Their contact information should be on your principal login, or their general phone number is listed here for your reference. Again, NOVA will be turning on the auto enroll feature at principal for you once we get your signed amendment back. And really all that involves at principal is turning on the auto enroll feature to your existing salary deferral service, or SDS. So all plans at principal have this salary deferral service already. We're just going to turn on the auto enroll feature for that, which we'll talk about in the next slide. There's no additional principal fee for this. Principal has been doing tracking for auto enroll for years now, and it's not really anything much different. So no additional fee there. Principal does support certain 180 and 360 integrations. They do need about a 60-day lead time on that, and do reach out to your principal representative if you have questions or if you're interested in that service feature. So again, your plan already has SDS. What is SDS? Just doing a little quick recap. But it's basically where you give information to principal, so you will tell them any deferral rates of your current employees if they don't have it already. And ongoing, you would add employees as they're hired. So once an employee is hired, you would go into principal, add their basic data, so that principal would know when they're eligible. When an employee is eligible, principal will then send out an enrollment form online to them. For the auto enrollment, there will be additional disclaimers, you know, that they are going to be auto enrolled unless they opt out, but an employee can then enroll online. After they enroll online with principal then sends a feedback file back to you as the plan sponsor through the message center. And that would be for any new elections. So if you had a new employee that wanted to sign up at 5% instead of the 10%, you know, you would be fed back that information, anyone who opted out. And then if you do decide to do auto escalation, principal will also track that and feed that back to you. Once you get that, of course, that's where you update your payroll system. In the handouts of this webinar, there is an additional principal flyer about SDS and auto enroll where you can read more about that. So for the auto enroll, the thing that is different is there will be a statement really to the employee once they're emailed the link with the enrollment materials. There'll be a statement bringing to their attention that they will be automatically enrolled at 10% or another percent you decide, unless they opt out. So principal will send out these enrollment materials 60 days prior to someone who's eligible, or if you have a eligibility period lesser than 60 days, principal will send the employee the email the business day after you enter in the information to principal. So that's just a little recap on how that SDS worked and what support principal is able to provide. Again, principal has been doing tracking with auto enroll, so their systems are already built out for that. Nova will be turning on that feature, and then definitely your principal rep is here to help as well. All right, so Yvette, I think we have some questions.
Yeah, a question came in. Did Nova require the auto enroll feature to be added with newer plans to avoid having to amend to add it later? If so, when was this implemented?
Can you repeat that question? What?
Did Nova require the auto enroll feature to be added with newer plans to avoid having to amend to add it later? If so, when was this implemented?
That was not done initially. You know, employers, when given the choice of delaying the implementation or addition of automatic enrollment to 1/1/2025, you know, most chose not to implement it currently, and we didn't include it automatically in most of the plans, like with a future effective date. I think that's the question. So that's why we're going through this process now to, you know, let people make affirmative choices now on what they want.
Okay. Next question is, how can we confirm or document a 0% desired contribution for an employee who opt out? I'm sorry, I didn't realize I was on mute.
No.
The next one is, how can we confirm or document a 0% desired contribution for employees who opt out?
So Kim, I don't know with principal exactly how they're, you know, when they provide a list or the enrollment materials. Most online enrollment processes will capture when somebody actually makes an affirmative election, even if it's 0. So, you know, if that's the case, then you should be able to pull a report. If it's a paper form or something of that nature, then you as the employer need to make sure that you're saving that form in a personnel file or even an electronic folder if you're scanning it, whatever, to capture that.
Awesome. Okay, and that was the last question coming in, so we can go ahead and close it out. Just a few reminders, on your go-to panel, you're going to see a drop-down for handouts. That's where you're going to find a copy of today's presentation in PDF form. If you are not able to see this on your panel, you can email us and we'll send you the handouts. If you do have any questions, you can email us webinars@nova401k.com and we can forward that over to Steve or Kim to respond. To view any of our webinars you may have missed and the recording of this session, you can follow us on our YouTube channel, which is www.nova401k.com/webinars. Thank you so much, Steve and Kim, for sharing your time and your knowledge with us today. And thanks again to everybody for joining. We hope you have a great day. Bye.